Picking up where we left off, we are now on natural capital. When we talk about natural capital, this is our overarching resources, everything that we get from the environment itself. Okay. And this can be broken down into two categories. We get natural resources. These are the physical things that we're getting. So minerals, things like aluminum that we're mining, forests for timber, water from lakes, rivers, the ocean, fertile land for growing crops. These are all natural resources. And so we get all of these things from nature, and they are part of that natural capital. The second portion of natural capital are ecosystem services. So these are things that nature is doing that provides a benefit for us. So nature naturally cleans water through the process of evaporation and raining and filtration through plants, cleans these things. And we get that. Nutrient cycling, where it cycles carbon and nitrogen so that things like plants can continue to grow. That's an ecosystem service. Pollination, okay, these animals that go around and pollinate our plants for us so that we don't have to go around with Q-tips and hand pollinate them ourselves. Okay, saves us a lot of time, saves us a lot of money. That's an ecosystem service where the natural world is providing some service to us for free. It's pretty incredible. Looking at our different types of natural resources, we have non-renewable. These things are limited. There's only so much that exists on Earth. They can't be replaced by natural means at a pace that meets its consumption. So when we look at something like oil, natural gas, and coal, these are the remains of mostly dead plants from like 300 million years ago. So these things can technically be renewed over the course of tens to hundreds of millions of years, but that is way outside of a human lifespan. And so because of that, we consider them non-renewable. Mineral resources are also non-renewable or exhaustible. There's only so much that exists on the planet. And once we use it all, it's gone. Okay. At some point, you either have to recycle those minerals, but with oil and natural gas, you turn it into different forms and you simply can't reuse it. Renewable resources, these can be replenished by natural processes within their sustainable yield. So when we manage forests for timber, we cut down a certain number of trees, plant trees in its place, go to a different area to cut some trees down so we're not clearing whole forests at a time. And so we're taking on a time scale what can grow. And so these are all renewable. Okay. These things can very easily become non-renewable. Okay. If we take more than can grow, then it becomes non-renewable. It's no longer sustainable. When we look at fish, we are overfishing most of the world, and fish populations are declining significantly because of that. So it could be a renewable resource, but if we don't do it sustainably, it could very quickly become non-renewable. Inexhaustible resources, these are those that exist essentially unlimited. The sun, solar energy that we get, okay, it will be burning for another 4 billion years. It is constant, consistent. It is always there. We cannot use all of the energy from the sun. It's impossible. Okay, wind, it's always going to exist because the sun exists. Right, we get differences in pressure in different areas and causes air to move, which is wind. And let me tell you this: putting up wind turbines does not slow down the wind. That is not a thing. Wind is inexhaustible. The tides, okay? Tides exist. It's movement of the earth, ebb and flow. The tides are also partially because of the moon, and that's not going anywhere anytime soon. So these are inexhaustible. So we talk about things like tidal power is a potential inexhaustible energy resource. And then the flow of water through rivers for things like hydroelectric dams, inexhaustible. Okay, that water will always flow. Ecosystem services. We've got 4 categories: provisioning, regulating, supporting, and cultural. And we'll look at each of these individually. Ecosystem services heavily reliant on the organisms that live in the environment. Okay, ecosystems are sustained through a pretty delicate balance. And if organisms are removed from those ecosystems, it can significantly impact the services that those ecosystems provide. And so we see this biodiversity as a key role because it keeps that balance in check. So that we don't get one population growing too much, damaging those ecosystems, and so on. And typically, when we lose an ecosystem service, it is oftentimes gone for good, or at least degraded for a very long time. So looking at our supporting system services, this allows for the continued function of ecosystems, so nutrient cycling. Okay, things like fungi, bacteria, cycling nitrogen. Okay, these things break down things that are dead, or they take nitrogen out of the atmosphere and turn it into a form for plants to use. And then we eat those plants to get the nitrogen we need, and so on. We get primary production, the growth of plants, basically. Okay, because most ecosystems are designated by the plants that live there in the primary production that exists. Pollination, again, things like bees, moths, butterflies, some birds, super important pollination, allowing plants to continue to reproduce. And then soil formation happens naturally. Soil is renewable, but that's if it is used at a rate to which it can be renewed. And most of the time with industrial agriculture, soil is lost at a rate faster than it can be renewed. So farmland gets a little bit worse and worse every year. Provisioning services, these are places that we get materials and resources for our survival. Okay, we get provisions. So we've got energy. Okay, hydroelectric dams provide us with electricity. Food. Okay, some food that we get is still wild caught. Lots of the food that most modern countries use, however, is cultivated. It's grown. It's been selectively bred to have very different characteristics than it would have had naturally. We'll look at a couple of those things when we talk about modern agriculture. Water purification. Right? We do a lot of things to water to make it unusable. Nature will turn that around and make it something that we can drink or use again. Genetic resources. With the Green Revolution in the 1970s and genetic engineering, we've done some pretty crazy stuff with plants that help them survive in environments they wouldn't have naturally survived in. And part of this is taking genes out of one organism and putting them in another. And all of the organisms that exist have very unique genetic resources that exist. Medicines, most of our medicines are based on things that are natural. So either we took it directly from something that is living, or we took something from a living thing and then we slightly modified it to work in a way that we wanted it to. Lots of medicines are synthetic, but they're based on something from nature ultimately. And then we've got raw materials, lumber for firewood or for building, whatever, fertilizer to help grow those crops and so on. Regulating services, carbon sequestration and climate regulation. I'm sure you've all heard of climate change. Looks like we're running out of time for this video. So we will pop up on this next video starting at regulating services.